I think most of the folks here tonight are probably familiar with Dr. Darrel Ray, but for those that may not be, Dr. Darrel Ray is a psychologist and student of religion, sociology, and anthropology. He has spoken at universities and national events throughout North America, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. He recently appeared on ABC News Nightline as an expert refuting Catholic exorcism. He is also founder and chairman of the board for Recovering from Religion and the Secular Therapist Project. In addition, Dr. Ray is a writer and speaker on leadership and organizational development, and also the author of 2 books on that topic. He's also the author of The God Virus, How Religion Affects Our Lives and Culture, and Sex and God, How Religion Distorts Sexuality, both of which are on sale up here. Just shameless plug for Dr. Ray. And he'll also autograph them for you, right? Right. What?
For a nickel.
For a nickel. In May of 2001, he published the survey Sex and Secularism, What Happens when You Leave Religion. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Darrel Ray.
It's working? Yeah, sounds like it is. Good. Well, thank you, Bill. Good to be back here. And I've got just a couple announcements myself before we get into the meat. I do want to emphasize our group, Recovering from Religion. Whether you are involved at all with that, over there is the lady that's the goddess of recovering from religion. And I started it 3 years ago, less than a year ago, and it took me 2 years to get up to 20 meetings or less. I handed it over to Sarah and Jerry DeWitt. How many of you know Jerry DeWitt? Okay, good. All right. And they went from 20 meetings to like 150 meetings in just the last less than a year. So they're just amazing what they've been able to do with RR. And if you haven't heard about our Secular Therapist Project, that's a big initiative we started less than 6 months ago to find therapists who are secular, because it's damn hard to find somebody who doesn't call themselves a Christian counselor. And that's an oxymoron, by the way, on how you get to be a Christian counselor, because it automatically lots off a whole area of examination around delusion. All right, so those are kind of the paid political announcements that I like to get online, look, find out about these things. Whether you're a member or not is irrelevant. I want you to tell other people about it. I want you to tell therapists about it. I want you to tell people who are looking for therapy. I want you to tell people who might want to start a group or might want to join a Recovering from Religion group in their own particular area. So, and I want to say thanks to Bill and Kara and the Omaha UNO group for putting this all together. And then I'm going to that photograph was taken at the American Atheist Convention this year, and that is a full-blown replica of what's underneath that gown, by the way. But in order to say this prayer, I have to be in proper regalia. Who are apostafarians in here? Okay, the rest of the apostafarians, bow your heads. The rest of you don't have to. All right. Dear Flying Spaghetti Monster, we thank you for giving us sex and sexuality, whether homo or heterosexual, bi or trans, and for not making us like those uptight Christians, Muslims, Mormons, and Baptists. We thank you for wonderful masturbatory fantasies, and for the pornography upon which they're often based. FSM, we ask that you grant us sex partners, lovers, wives, and husbands that know where our G-spot, the clitoris, and the sweet spot on our penis is. Grant us long, loving foreplay with deep, wet kisses and huge orgasms and loving cuddles after. Grant us the courage and wisdom to communicate openly and honestly with our partners and give them more pleasure than we receive, for we know it is far better to give than to receive. Your noodliness, we do not need 72 virgins. In fact, we ask that you send us no virgins, because we don't want to have to train them. Unless, of course, they're very willing to be trained. We especially plead today that you not send any repressed Christian virgins, male or female, for they will only feel guilty with their abstinence-only problems. And abstinence-only training and create great problems. You're posthumous. We ask that you give us the wisdom and understanding to appreciate our partner's kinks, or lack thereof. Whether foot worship or spanking, talking dirty or ropes, help us to appreciate their full sexuality, and lead us not into temptation of judgment and scorn of others when their sexual preferences are not ours. We do ask in the name of Raman for retribution, shame, and scorn on pedophile priests, hypocritical ministers sleeping with a choir director, and gay-bashing closeted ministers, etc. Oh, Spaghetti-O. We ask that you send condoms and birth control in abundance, and your blessings to the many dedicated workers at the Trojan Condom Factory and Planned Parenthood. In the name of Dan Savage and Greta Christina, we pray, for they are the true gods and goddesses of this world. Do I hear a Ramen? All right. Bless you. Bless you. Well, now that we've got the formalities out of the way, we'll move on. This is the university, and occasionally I have art students in my talks. This was the original version before the Catholic Church got a hold of it and censored it right away. So today, I've got a question to ask you. How many of you masturbate? I do. I masturbate. All right. There's only a few liars in this group. Imagine asking that particular question in a church or a mosque, a Baptist, Mormon temple. It wouldn't happen. So that's where we're going to go today. We're going to learn a little bit about sex, sexuality, evolution, of course. I could have talked about other cultures, and talked about in the book a lot of different cultures. Because what I wanted people to know when I wrote Sex and God was, we are so restricted in our understanding of human sexuality. There are lots of cultures with very different views of how human relationships, sexual relationships should go. This particular culture, the Nah culture, doesn't even have a word for husband or wife. They don't have a word for father because they don't have marriage in their particular culture. Marco Polo visited this culture in the 1200s. Been around for a long time. Now, we would hear the religious right saying the fundamental principles of society are based upon the nuclear family and all that sort of bullshit. Well, there's a culture that doesn't, and it's survived for thousands of years without good Christians coming along and telling them how to have children and who to have them with. I could have talked about personalities. I have a whole talk on this that I give on personality research and sexuality and religion. But we're not going to talk about that today either. What we're going to talk about is sexy evolution, what the Pope does not know about human sexuality, which could be a huge subject, of course. We're going to try and limit it today. So there is evidence in your body. It's present all over your body, whether it's your breast, the shape of your penis, the shape of your vagina and clitoris, the semen, the chemistry of your semen, the semen of the chemistry of the vagina, even down to the sounds you make while you're having an orgasm, ladies. Mainly the ladies on that one. How many of you read Sex at Dawn? Sex at Dawn. Nobody's read Sex at Dawn?
I'm in the process.
You're in the process, okay. It's the second best book on sex ever written. I'll let you guess what the first best book is. Hint, hint. No, I love Sex at Dawn. In fact, Christopher Ryan, the author of Sex at Dawn, actually endorsed this book. But I really love Sex at Dawn. It's a great book. The viscosity of your semen, the composition of your sperm. We'll talk about some of these things, though we don't have time for all of them tonight. So, why do we have sex? Let's begin at the very beginning. Why is there sex in the first place? It's actually been a critical question nobody's been able to answer. And I think we now have the answer. And it's kind of an interesting answer. Anybody read the book Parasite Rex? Parasite Rex. Oh, nobody's read that either, okay? It's a good book too. The reason we have sex is because of parasites. Parasites are constantly invading us, infecting us. You are a habitable zone for parasites. In fact, probably 90% of all the cells in your body don't belong to you, do not have your DNA in them. Bacteria alone in your gut probably outnumber by orders of magnitude almost the number of cells that you have in your own body. So parasites are constantly using us. We're just a zone for parasites to get into. And our immune system has to stay ahead of those parasites. So by mixing up the gene pool through sex, it helps us stay ahead of parasites. Now there are some organisms that don't reproduce by sex. This one, the banana, unfortunately was created by humans. That's not what bananas looked like, 500 years ago. We have bred these, and we've bred them to be clones. Every banana you eat today is a clone of every other banana you eat. Back in the 1920s, there was a very good variety of bananas. In fact, your grandparents or great-grandparents might have told you it actually tastes better than the bananas we have today. That's a report that I've gotten from people who should probably know. They were around at that time. But a virus came through called the Panama virus, and it killed all the bananas. Now that same virus, so they had to rebreed bananas and create another variety that had resistance to the Panama virus, and now it's coming back. Indonesia is now being inundated with this disease, and it's killing all sorts of banana plantations. It's only a matter of time until it gets to Central America and the Caribbean, which once again will probably devastate the bananas that we know today. But the reason bananas are so easily attacked by this virus in a very short period of time, it's not that long between the 1930s and now, is because it has very few defenses. It's a clone. So if one banana is susceptible, all bananas are going to be susceptible. If this reproduced sexually, it might be able to create and keep ahead of the disease. So sex, that's plants. But that's bananas. Sex organs themselves are among the most rapidly evolving organs that we have in our bodies. They're the most rapidly evolving organs of any species. And Carl Linnaeus, the great classifier, the man that created the classification system that we now know today and use, Homo sapiens and that sort of stuff, the Latin approach to classifications, he studied flowers. Some people thought he was a sex maniac because all he did was look at sex organs. But it was the sex organs of flowers, of plants. And that's what a flower is. It's the sex organ of a plant. I love photographing flowers. These are flowers that I've taken this one in Colorado. Here's another one in Colorado. These are actually very closely related flowers, but they're totally different species. And you can see in flowers that they can be very closely related, yet their sex organs can be quite different. Look at orchids. Orchids are all, one group of flower, and yet you can have vastly different sex organs among orchids. So, rapidly evolving. The reason plants evolve so fast is in response to disease, response to parasites, response to insects that fertilize and carry the pollen and such, and in response to the environment, how wet or dry or cold or warm it is. So all these things influence the sex organs. And the rest of the plant might not change much. They might have the same leaves, but the flower itself would change very rapidly. Animals also have sex organs, in case you haven't looked recently. Animals also evolve sex organs very fast. Your sex organs are evolving faster than any other part of your body. And we'll understand what that's all about. But first, let's look at one particular animal and their sex organs. This is the Argentine blue-billed duck. It's an interesting duck because it has a sex organ that's amazing. 97% of all birds do not have penises. 3% of birds do have penises. The interesting thing about these birds is they don't run off of the blood pressure system. Human males, guys, yours runs off of blood pressure. Ducks runs off the lymph system. Literally, the lymphatic system of the duck creates a penis that then can inseminate the female. So let's look at, this is duck porn. If anybody's sensitive about pornography, close your eyes or leave the room. We're going to look at duck porn. I'm going to show you this video twice, because I'm a pervert. And I want you to look at it very carefully. Watch it closely, all right? Let's see about this duck. This is 1/10 speed. This is slowed down 10 times. Watch at the end. Isn't that cool? All John Holmes did not do that any better. Try again. There you go. Isn't that interesting? So that's the duck penis slowed down, ejaculation slowed down 10 times. They can get in and out really fast. And there's a reason for that. You'll notice how the shape of that penis is? It's a kind of an odd shape, isn't it? It's a corkscrew shape. Well, for years, biologists, duck biologists, aren't we glad we have sex duck workers around? For years, biologists couldn't figure out why are duck penises so huge. I mean, this duck penis is half the length of the whole duck or more. And why are they so long? And why do they get in and out so fast? And most interesting, why are they corkscrewed? Why? Guys, that doesn't look like yours, does it? It doesn't look like mine either. So, what's going on with ducks? Why is that happening? And they couldn't figure it out. Biologists couldn't figure it out until Dr. Patricia Brennan at the University of Glasgow, Edinburgh, or Glasgow, obviously, decided to do something revolutionary. She decided to dissect a female duck's reproductive tract. Nobody ever thought to look at the females. Isn't that amazing? For 100 years, people were asking, why do males have this shaped penis? And nobody could say, until Dr. Brennan comes along and says, well, let's look inside the female and see what comes up. And what she found was this. This is the female vagina. This is the male penis. The female vagina is corkscrewed in the opposite direction as the male's. Isn't that interesting? Corkscrewed in the opposite direction. It also has all sorts of dead ends in it. Now, why is this? Well, I owned ducks years ago. I don't own them anymore. I had 7 ducks, 3 geese, and 2 swans. I have a big pond in my front yard. How many of you have been to one of my picnics? All right, so you guys know, you've seen my picnic at my property. So these ducks would be out there, and what I noticed, this is long before I learned what I'm getting ready to talk to you about, I noticed these ducks were always, the males, were always jumping on the females. I also noticed that females clearly had a preference for one guy. You know, Susie Duck would like Joey Duck over here, and she'd waddle real sexily, and he'd follow her around, and then all of a sudden he'd jump on her. And it took him about 1 second to do his stuff. When he got off, oh, and she'd holler and scream. She was having a good time. It was pretty obvious. She really liked Joey. But then, all the other guys would see what's going on. They'd gather around. As soon as Joey hopped off, all the others would jump on. And she did not like that. The sounds she would make were very different than the sounds she was making with him. Plus, she was trying to get away. She would flap her wings. She'd run away. She'd fly away. If she could, she'd go underwater. If she could, she'd do almost anything to get away from these guys. They were raping her, and it was clearly rape because she did not like them. She did not want to have sex with them. But with 3 guys on here, 4 guys, she was going to get raped. And she did. Well, Dr. Brennan, among others, said, what's going on here? There's a lot of rape going on. Who's actually fathering these kids, these ducklings? She did some interesting research. She looked at the actual DNA of the eggs that came out of the female, and she found that 97% of all the eggs were fathered by the guys she liked. 97%. Only 3% of the eggs were fathered by the rapists. In other words, female ducks have control over who gets to fertilize her eggs. And pretty darn good control. 97%. Not bad control. And the way she does it is, if the guy's raping her, she just corkscrews the opposite direction. She traps the semen in different places so it can't get up to fertilize the egg. And of course, she's resisting all the time too, making it difficult. So, but on the other side, the guys are having an erection that only takes about a second to get the erection and ejaculate. Bang, just like that. He's in and he's out. So there's like a war going on, isn't there, between the sex organs. If you look at a different type of duck, you'll get a slightly different kind of sex organ. You'll get a slightly different strategy. Every species among ducks has slightly different amounts of change going on in their sex organs. And there's maybe less rape in one and more rape in another. But rape is pretty common among ducks. Dr. Brennan also got ducks. You saw the duck porn I showed you earlier. She let the duck put his penis in here and here and here. And what she found was ducks do best in the straight one or the one that's corkscrewed the way the duck's own penis is corkscrewed. Makes perfect sense. So what we see here is evolution at work. Evolution is changing the sex organs of ducks fairly rapidly. You can actually, well, just like Carl Linnaeus, you can look at a flower, look at the sex organs of a flower, and tell what the mating strategy, what the reproductive strategy of that particular flower is. You can do the same thing for animals. All you have to do is look at their sex organs, and you can do a pretty good guess at how they're reproducing, at their particular strategy for inseminating or not inseminating, for resisting or not resisting insemination. This is called antagonistic coevolution. Sounds antagonistic coevolution. And you see this in lots and lots of species. The male has a particular approach to mating, and the female has her approach, and they're antagonistic. Because the female wants to control who fertilizes the egg. The male, on the other hand, wants to fertilize the egg at almost any cost. So you get species all over the world using different strategies. There was one study of water striders. You know what a water strider is? The little things that look like spiders on the top of water, but they're not spiders. They're actually an insect. Of 15 different species. You would be surprised. You go out on my pond, you'll see water striders all over, and they look identical. Even under a magnifying glass, they look identical. But there's subtle little changes. In one pond, one biologist looked at the species on a single pond. I don't remember where, somewhere in North America, and he found there were 15 different species of water striders on a single pond, and most of them looked identical just on first inspection. Of those 15, every single species had a different set of sex organs. Males had different sex organs of one species than the next one. Females had a different set. In other words, even though these apparently are very similar kinds of insects, they still have very different strategies. And I'll come back and talk a little bit about that later. So every species has a mating strategy, and it's different from male to female. Here is a picture, sample of 5 different mammalian penises. 5 different mammalian penises. Looking at those, you can make a good guess of the mating strategy of that particular male mammal, just by looking at the penis. Or you could look at the spiny anteater. Here's a picture of the spiny anteater, and that's his penis. He has 4 heads. If the little head's doing your thinking for you, this guy's got big problems. This guy ejaculates, the first time he has sex, he ejaculates out of this side. The next time he has sex, he ejaculates out of that side. These two do not have any opening for ejaculation. Isn't that an interesting strategy? Totally different than anything you and I have seen as humans or as primates even. So every species has got these quirks that is unique to them. And it's competitive, it's antagonistic between the male and the female. By the way, if you're a male, you make love to this gal very carefully. It's actually like a porcupine. It's in Australia, though. So, this is, I just given you kind of a big picture of sex and evolution. Excuse me. But now let's look at something closer to us, and that's the great apes. There are 4 different great apes. There's the gorillas, there's the chimpanzees, there's the bonobos, and there's the humans. Each of these species has its own particular approach to sex and sexuality. Here's the size of the penises of the 4 species I just gave you. The gorilla would look like this, because among gorillas, size matters, as we'll find out a little bit later, but not penis size. This is the size of a chimpanzee penis or a bonobo penis. They're about the same size. And this is the size of a human penis. So we didn't want to get too pornographic here yet. So that's why we're using vegetables. Each primate has its own sexual strategy. So let's begin with the gorilla. Size does matter, and gorillas are polygamous, and they have something called sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism is unique to mammals. Other kinds of animals don't have it. It means the difference in size between the male and the female. The more difference there is in size between male and female, the more females a single male tries to dominate. Look at the elephant seal. Literally almost as big as an elephant. It's gigantic. I think the average elephant seal is 4 to 5 times bigger than the average female. One elephant seal will dominate 5 to 10 other females. Well, that's what's going on with the gorillas. One gorilla, silverback, will mate and try to control. It doesn't work too well, but he tries to control anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe even 5 other females. Females, when a female becomes of age, when she starts becoming sexually mature, females in the gorilla species have to leave their family and find a male. And they'll wander around for a year or so until they find a male they like. And they voluntarily associate with a silverback. And a female gorilla will stay with a silverback for anywhere from 3, 4, 5 years, maybe longer. But when she's tired of the guy, she goes and finds somebody else. She's not stuck with him. But she has chosen that guy, and she stays with him, and there might be 3 or 4 other sisters, gorillas. Now, among the females, they're pretty mobile. Like I just said, they're not stuck with the guy. Sex only lasts about a minute. Ladies, if you don't like it now, don't go to the gorilla community. You're not going to get it any better there. 1.25 inches is the average size of the gorilla penis. And they don't have sex very often. Maybe once a month. And only when the female is sexually receptive. The female's not ready, the guy's not too interested in her. They have very small testes. They produce much less semen than we do as humans. And they only mate when the female's in estrus, as I said earlier. So, sex, what we'll see as we look at the primates, is sex takes on other functions. In the gorilla, if you look at the way the gorilla mates, it looks like a lot like a bull and a cow in a bovine community. Or it looks a lot like other kinds of animals who have a high level of sexual dimorphism, difference between in the sizes. It looks a lot like the way dogs reproduce. Dogs only generally have sex when the female's in heat. And that's the way the gorillas are. Gorillas only generally have sex when the female is receptive. That's the most common way. Insects are that way. Dogs are that way. Cats are that way. Almost every mammal in almost every species on the planet only tries to have sex when the female is ready to have sex. Now there are exceptions, and sometimes your dog will hunt the wrong place. But that's the males. You got to give them cut a little slack there. So, besides, we already have established that sex is generally for keeping ahead of the parasites. You mix up the genes, and the parasites have to find a new strategy for infecting you and causing parasitic disease or infection. But sex can take on other functions. So let's look at other functions. Those functions can include dominance hierarchies, it can include bonding, and it can include stress relief and conflict management. And you wouldn't think of this, reasons why we have sex, but that in fact is, contrary to what the Pope tells us. Chimpanzees, they use a strategy of flooding. And they want to produce a huge amount of sperm and semen. They also are a multi-mate species. One male will mate with many females, but it's the top 2 or 3 or 4 males in a chimp community that get to mate with the females. The low guys in the totem pole don't get to mate openly. But if they get out in the forest and find a female that's happy to see them, then they might have sex. Oh, and by the way, it's the same way with the gorillas. This big silverback, he's got these 3 or 4 females, and he thinks he's got control of them. But every now and then, she may slip out and have sex with somebody else. And we know that because the genes tell us that. The babies coming out of them aren't always the silverbacks. So cheating is common, even among gorillas, among other things. But in chimpanzees, there's all sorts of multi-mate going on. 2 or 3 males are mating with all the females. And the females actually seek out the males. If a female chimp is in heat, if she's receptive, if she's estrus, then she has a big billboard on her butt. It's about that big and it's red, and it says, "I am ready to screw somebody." And she will go find the most dominant male in the group to have sex with him. She seeks out the high status male, the alpha males. She will have sex with the 1 or 2 or 3 top males in the troop. She's not real interested in the low status males. Maybe she'll have sex with a guy she likes later out in the woods, but that's not nearly as common as literally seeking out alpha males, high status males among the chimps. Chimps have large penises relative to some of the other animals we've seen, especially gorillas, and extremely large testes. Their testes are twice as big as ours. Twice as big. Now, chimps can weigh about as much as we do, maybe a little more in some cases, but they're not that much bigger than us. So why are their testes so big? Why do they produce copious amounts of semen? Because their mating strategy is to flush the other guy out. Remember, females will mate with multiple males. If I'm going to inseminate the female's egg, I got to get rid of the guy that was just there before me, or I got to overwhelm him. And chimps have a whole lot of different strategies for making sure I get the egg and you don't, or I get rid of you if you did get there before me. They only mate, chimps again, only mate during estrus, which is common among most species. What's not common here is that in chimps, sex is a part of the social hierarchy. Alpha males get the pick of the females. Females actually seek out the males. So that's a component that has nothing to do with reproduction. It has something to do with the way the social structure of the group is put together. Males create status alliances. There are usually 2, 3, 4 males who are all allies, and those males control the males and the females within the troop. Sex only lasts about 30 seconds, but they can have quite a bit of sex. They like sex in chimps, but it's a few chimps having sex, males chimps having sex with females. So that's the chimp strategy. Does it look anything like the gorillas? It's quite different from the gorillas, except the female mates during estrus, or they only mate during estrus. It doesn't look much like our strategy, at least the strategy that we think we know about. Let's look at the bonobos. Bonobos are a tiny group, tiny compared to chimps, in Africa that used to be thought to be chimps, but they even call them pygmy chimps. And we now know, genetically speaking, that bonobos are clearly a different species than chimps. They look a lot like chimps, but their sexual behavior is very different than chimps. In bonobos, the females rule. It's a matriarchal society, if you will. The females generally create an alliance. 2 or 3 top females control everything else within the troop. If some adolescent male gets too much testosterone going, starts causing trouble. The females are about 10% smaller than the males. But those 3 females will gang up on the guy and beat the crap out of him if he doesn't behave himself. In the bonobo community, the male sons stay with the mother. The females have to leave the troop and join another troop. When the female leaves the troop to go find another troop, she has to kowtow and cater to the senior females of the new troop. Now, how does she do that? She does it by grooming the female and having sex with the female. There's a hell of a lot of female-to-female sex among the bonobos. Lesbianism is rampant among females. There's actually probably more female-to-female sex in bonobos than there is male-to-female sex in bonobos. And there's quite a bit of that too, we'll find out. Sex is everywhere. It's in a bonobo community, if somebody sees a fruit tree with fruit, discovers a fruit tree with fruit on it, they jump up and down and scream and holler and say, "There's fruit over here, guys, come on over." But before anybody can eat any fruit, they have to have sex. So they have a group orgy, everybody has sex, then they climb up in the tree and they eat the fruit. If a panther or some predator goes by, everybody hides, huddles, real quiet. When the predator's finished, in order to relieve the stress, they all have an orgy. They have sex. Everybody screws everybody else. Males screw females, females screw each other, males screw males. Yeah, it's just that's the way you relieve stress in the bonobo community. Bonobos menstruate. Chimps don't menstruate. They have estrus. Humans menstruate and bonobos menstruate. There's only a handful of species on the planet that actually menstruate. It's very rare. And for a long time, nobody understood what the purpose of menstruation was. And finally, just in the last few years, the answer has been found. I don't have time to talk about it today, but if you just Google P.Z. Myers and menstruation, he has a great article that explains it quite well. I won't go into it because I don't have time. But it's really interesting. Why do women menstruate? Very few other species actually menstruate. And by the way, there are other species that do it, and they're not even closely related to us. And that tells us what the strategy is. Menstruation is actually a part of our sexual strategy. But I'll let you do your own research on that. Bonobos have a large penis relative to the body size, and they have huge testes that are the same size as chimps. With all this sex, you've got to have a lot of semen. And their strategy is flush the other guy out too. I mean, if you're late to the game, you better have a hell of a lot of semen to get the other guy to move on out so you can get the egg. They mate almost any time with almost anyone. Male to male, female to female, doesn't matter, they do it whatever, however they want. Sex lasts 30 to 40 seconds, so you get a little bit better here with the bonobos. Bonobos like lots of sex, and they enjoy it many times a day. Whereas some chimps might not get sex for weeks on end because they're not alpha enough. Or some females don't get sex because the male alphas don't want to have sex with them. Even though she's presenting herself, she's trying to get somebody to have sex with her, they won't do it. Because literally, the males have the choice of who they want. There are thousands of sex acts among the bonobos for every live birth. Now that says something alone about the bonobo strategy. Sex is not about reproduction. If it was, they'd only have sex during estrus. But they don't. They have sex anytime they damn well please. And menstruation is also known as hidden estrus. You cannot easily look at a bonobo and see if they're in heat or not, whether they're in estrus or not. Just like you can't look at a human and tell if a female is in estrus or not. We hide our estrus, bonobos hide their estrus. So they have similarities in their sexual strategies to us. Female bonobos actually have breasts. They're size A's, but they're breasts. Chimps do not have breasts. Chimps are as flat, female chimps are as flat-chested as human males are. But not female bonobos. They actually have breasts. So there again, a similarity in how their sexual strategy. So I thought this is a good comment here. It says here that bonobo societies, females are in charge and sex rather than violence is used in order to keep order. She says, well, thank God we've evolved. But that's the way it is. If there's conflict, if two bonobos get in a fight, which is actually kind of rare, but if they do get in a fight, when they're finished fighting, then they have sex. That's just the way it is. If you want to read more, read Franz de Waal's books. He's got 2 or 3 books out on bonobos. He's like the world's expert on chimps and primarily on bonobos as well. So now here's an interesting photograph. This is 2 females, and they have clitorises that are as big as my little finger. And they love to rub clitorises. These 2 females are having sex, missionary style, and they're French kissing each other, by the way. Here's a male and female having sex. That's a closer picture of the clit. Actually, almost looks like a penis. It's so big. This is a bonobo penis. Look like yours, guys? Look at it real close. Okay, it doesn't look like mine. I think this is the best. Can you imagine? For years there was this rumor that most zoos did not have bonobo apes. They would have chimps, but they wouldn't have bonobos. Well, part of the reason for that is because bonobos are rare. There are not that many of them in Africa, and they're kind of protected, and we need to be careful about that. But even at that, there's only a few zoos in the whole world that carry them. And the rumor was, that it was because, can you imagine a Christian creationist group walking through a zoo watching two females French kissing? That might mess up the lesson plans for the day. Or watching a male and male, even worse, having sex. Because there's a lot of male-male sex in the bonobos. I want you to keep in mind and remember what that penis looks like right there. And we're going to come back to the bonobo penis in a minute. Let's now look at the human mating strategy. We now have seen 3 of our closest relatives, and they're very close to us genetically, we know that. But we can also see there's some antagonistic coevolution going on among the 3 previous groups. We can see that females have their approach to sex and males have their approach to sex. Some is more, let's have a lot of sex like in the bonobos. Others, no, we're only going to have sex based upon status, as we see in the chimps. Or it's only based upon dominant male positioning, which we see in the gorillas. So let's look at humans. Why do humans have such large penises? We have enormous penises relative to many other species. Why is your penis shaped the way it is? If you're a guy, of course. Why does human sex last so long? Human sex lasts from 4 to 10 minutes. You didn't see anybody else up here that lasts that long. No, none of the other primates last that long. Why do humans have testes that are larger than gorillas, twice as large as gorillas, but half as large as bonobos and chimps? And why do human sperm have different kinds of sperm? There's actually 3 different kinds of sperm in us. There's anybody read Sperm Wars? The book Sperm Wars? Got an interesting book. A fellow biologist out of the University of Manchester, England. I don't know why the English are always into this sex stuff. It's because George Bush wouldn't allow any to be funded here in the last 10 years. But the last 10 years, a lot of this research is what's come forward. Robin Baker was the fellow's name. He and some other. Robin Baker did research. I don't know if you've ever heard, but human sperm, or a lot of sperm, has a lot of degenerate sperm or deformed sperm. And that was when I was growing up. They said, well, you know, about 80% of all sperm are deformed. Why are sperm deformed? Well, Robin Baker found out they're not deformed. They're just different types of sperm. Now we know from other species that different kinds of sperm exist. Insects have sperm that have different functions. And we see it even in other primates, but nobody bothered to look at humans and ask, why do we have all these funny shaped sperm among humans? And now we know that there's at least 3 kinds of sperm. There's the getter sperm, and that's 10 to 15% of the sperm in every ejaculate is designed to go get the egg. Then there's the warrior sperm, and those sperm have got proteins on the head of the sperm that are designed to kill other sperm. Kill sperm that don't belong to its particular group that's invading the female at that time. And then there's a 3rd kind of sperm they're called blocker sperm. And these actually create a sticky mass that stops other sperm from getting through, getting in. Now, in the chimp and in the bonobo, the male creates very thick blocker sperm. Kind of like blood coagulates. You know, once it coagulates, it's pretty thick. You're not going to penetrate it too easily if you're a tiny little sperm. That's what chimps and bonobos do. They create a mass that blocks the tube so that the sperm can't get through. Humans have the same thing. We have a gene that's identical or almost identical to the chimps and the bonobos that creates blocker sperm. Now, the difference is our blocker sperm don't work as well. Now guys, I know none of us in here masturbate, but you've probably noticed when you masturbate, ladies, you've noticed this, I'm sure, how sticky it gets really quick. I mean, it's really viscous, it's smooth when it first comes out, and then all of a sudden it seems to get sticky. That's the blocker sperm doing their job. They're trying to stop anybody else from getting in there. Does that sound like a monogamous species to you? Just a clue there. Just think about that. Why do women menstruate, and why do we hide our menstruation? There's a question there. Why is the female reproductive tract so hostile to sperm? You women, you are dangerous to our sperm. The chemical levels and acidic levels of your, or the pH levels of your vagina are actually dangerous to sperm. It's tough for us to get through. Why do women have breasts? Why do bonobos have breasts? These are all questions that we can ask. But why would a species go to the trouble to create a penis the shape it is, breasts the shape they are, chemistry in the vagina and the semen the way it is? There's not some evolutionary reason for it. Therein lies the key to what our strategy is for our sexual strategy. Everything we see in humans can be found in other species. Everything I've described here can be found in some other species. It's just that our species has our particularly unique combination. I already told you about the sperm, the different kinds of sperm. Well, we know those same sperm exist in bonobos and chimps. But they have better blocker sperm than we have, because blocking is not quite as big a deal with us as it is with them. We have a different approach than they do. So every combination can be found, but it's a different combination based upon that particular species strategy. Now I ask you to remember what the bonobo's penis looked like. Well, let's look at this penis. Does this look more familiar to you? Look at this one right here. That's probably looks like most of you guys in here. What's the difference between that one and what we saw in the bonobo? Any ideas? Any observations? Yeah. It's curved, okay.
It's got the head of the penis?
It's got a head, right. What's the head all about? Well, again, our friend Robin Baker at the University of Manchester was curious. Nobody had ever thought about this, or nobody had ever investigated it. So what he did is he went down to the porn shop. And you know, you get these vaginas, fake vaginas, and you get an average size penis, dildo. And he took and injected liquid into the fake vagina that was roughly the viscosity of human semen. And, there's several different viscosities, so he tested several different viscosities. Then he took the dildo and he simply pumped into the vagina. And what had happened? 80% of the semen that was in there got pumped out. 80% got pumped out. Now remember, what's the strategy of semen production for the bonobo and the chimp? Flood it out, right. Well, ours is different. Ours is pump it out. Suck it out. That's what that head does. This acts like a pump, a vacuum. And when you push the penis in, semen can flow over it. When you pull it out, that head pulls the semen out of the vagina. Why would we need to have a head on our penis if we were monogamous? Why are guys pumping other guys' semen out if there's no other guy's semen in there? That tells us something about our recent evolutionary history. And it shows that we've diverged from chimps and bonobos, and we now have our own strategy. We're not blocking the other guy as much as we're pumping the other guy out. We're sucking his semen out. And guys, maybe you've noticed, gals, I'm sure you have, as soon as he comes, what happens? What? He loses it, right? He doesn't stay hard. You don't want to pump your own semen out. You're shooting your semen in there, you want to keep it in there. And that's what happens. Your penis goes down, you deflate, and you get out of there. And that's our strategy. We're not flooding the other guy out, we're pumping the other guy out. And once we finish pumping ours in, And that is the secret to why human sex lasts so long. It takes 4 to 10 minutes to pump the other guy out. 4 to 10 minutes. That's why bonobos don't need a lot of time. All you need to get in there, shoot a massive amount of semen in there, flood the other guy out, and you got a better chance of getting the egg. Whereas humans, we pump the other guy out, shoot ours in, and then deflate and get out. It's very logical. It makes beautiful sense. But until Robin Baker came along and did this kind of research, nobody understood why the human penis is shaped the way it is. Now, we have, there's other species that have a similar strategy. Remember I talked about the water striders? Most water strider species have a bottle brush approach to mating. The penis of a water strider looks like a bottle brush. If you've had a baby and you've bottle fed them, you know what I'm talking about. You clean the bottle out with a bottle brush. Well, what happens in this water striders is the male sticks his penis into the female and brushes out the other guy's semen and then ejaculates his own egg. So he's cleaning the bottle out so he can get his own semen in there. Well, we're kind of the same. It's a similar strategy. Instead of pumping out, he's brushing it out. In fact, the brushes actually work to pull things out of the female on the water strider. So, we now can explain in ways we've never been able to do before, we can explain why the human penis is shaped the way it is. It is a pump, a vacuum pump. That's why human sex lasts 4 to 10 minutes. And that's why human penis is shaped different from other primates that we're very closely related to. And why it deflates immediately after sex is finished. I already mentioned to you the 3 kinds of sperm, but there's a 4th level. This is the coolest thing about evolution. It's a war. Antagonistic co-evolution. There's always a war going on. So I've told you the 3 kinds of sperm, but there's one other thing going on inside of humans, and that's the human sperm has a way of not only blocking and getting the other guy's sperm, but we have a gene that dissolves the block. Think about it. Dissolves the block. Chimps and bonobos have the same gene. So the chimp ejaculates into the female, or the bonobo, or the human, and the blocker sperm make this mass, this coagulant, that stops other sperm from getting in. But the warrior sperm have a protein on the head that allows them to dissolve the block of the previous guy that was there. Isn't that cool? I mean, it's a real interesting war, and it's going on all the time. And we see it in chimps, humans, and bonobos. You guys, you're producing chemicals that unblock the other guy who's trying to block you. It's just mind-boggling how this all works, isn't it? All right, so there's a little bit of evidence here you've probably been noticing that we are a multi-mate species. Now, the Pope would say we are a monogamous species. Of course, the Pope never had sex in his whole life, according to him. I don't believe it. So he says we're a monogamous species. Christians say we're a monogamous species. Oh, the Muslims don't, though. They say we're a polygamous species, and guys can have up to 4 wives. Except Muhammad, he could have 9 wives. But the rule in Islam is you can only have 4 wives. Humans are no more monogamous than the bonobos or the chimps. We are multi-mate, and we have lots, generally speaking, we have lots of mates throughout our lifetime. Now, we may mate differently or slightly differently, but why in tarnation would we create all these different kinds of sperm, all this chemicals, and a head of a penis that's designed to deal with other guys' sperm that's already in the vagina? Because sperm can last up to 5 days inside of the female. So if you've been out hunting and gathering, or hunting, mastodons or rabbits, and you come back, you don't know if your gal's been screwing around or not. So what do? You have to get in there and you have to pump the other potential guy out. You have to send your own ejaculate in. And what Robin Baker found in his research, Because after he used the fake stuff, then he brought real humans in and started watching them, doing his own pornography. What Robin Baker found was guys who'd been separated from their females for a significant period of time, and there was any potential that she had been with another male, his actual insertion penetration lasted for up to 50% longer than if he didn't suspect she could have been, or she didn't have an opportunity to be with a male. He had several different ways to test this. But it's interesting. I don't know, guys, if you've noticed, but you've been away from home for a long time. You get home, first time you have sex, it's a hell of a lot better than it normally is. And it's not just because you're horny, it's because you're pumping the other guy out who slipped in while you were gone. I'm not saying anything about you ladies. We're just not taking anything for granted. We're not taking any chances. All right, so in humans, sex is for bonding, and it's for recreation, and it's for health. Sex, we have 10,000 or more sex acts for every live birth. Just think about how much sex you've had. Oh, and you've got to add masturbation in there for both men and women. Every time you masturbate, that goes into the accounting system. So if sex is for reproduction, as the Pope tells us it is, then there's something wrong. Why are we having sex 10,000 times for every time we actually have a baby? Something else is going on, and it's because we like sex for bonding, we like sex for recreation, and we use sex for other things like stress control. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people say, when I'm getting under a lot of stress, I masturbate. It relieves the tension. I get under a lot of stress, I ask my wife or husband if we can have sex, because it helps relieve my stress. Many women have discovered that they've got PMS. Sex reduces the symptoms of PMS. I almost think PMS, don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert here, but I almost think PMS is the woman's body saying, have sex, reduce the stress. Whatever's causing the PMS, sex seems to reduce it. So there's two are related, and has nothing to do with reproduction. So when the Pope says, the Pope's sex is like my dog. This is my dog, Sugar. She's the sweetest dog on the planet, best pet I've ever had. But if my dog could have sex, she can't, thank goodness. If she could have sex, she would only have sex the way the Pope wants to have sex, just for procreation. That's the religious approach to sexuality. The religious approach in the West. It's not necessarily the approach of all religions, but it certainly is of what we know in our culture. Now let's move on to masturbation, which the Pope says will send you straight to hell. We have masturbation is actually a very healthy thing for males to do and for females. And what it does, masturbation cleans the pipes out. Remember I told you sperm only lasts for about 5 days in the female? Well, it only lasts for 5 days in the male too. So if your sperm is older than 5 days, it's starting to lose its potency. You're not going to inseminate or impregnate the female if you got old sperm. So you got to keep the sperm flowing. You got to keep the pipes clean. You got to keep the semen fresh. Guys, this is your cue. Jack off as much as you want. And really keep, because it helps you get ready. You never know if you're going to have a female to impregnate. So you want to have fresh sperm. There's a lot of motivation for males to keep that sperm fresh in case you get an opportunity. Female masturbation has similar, not similar, but equally positive response because it makes the female more sexually responsive. Women who masturbate on a regular basis are more sexually responsive themselves to their mate. They lubricate faster and easier, and they stay lubricated easier. Masturbation is simply the female's opportunity to practice sex without the guy, so that when it does happen, she'll be ready for it. Women who don't masturbate, and I've met some in my career, my life as a psychologist, actually in other places in my life too, they have more trouble oftentimes having an orgasm, and sometimes have other troubles like, vaginosis, pain during sex and all. My experience, and again, I'm no expert here, I don't claim it. My experience, though, has been that women who don't masturbate have more symptoms of dysfunctional sexual symptoms, like pain during sex, or difficulty lubricating, or difficulty getting turned on, that sort of thing. So, sex has the benefit of relieving stress and creating health. Women who masturbate, men who masturbate actually have healthier sexual reproductive tracts. But Christian sex, and I do call it that, there's human sexuality, then there's Christian sexuality, and there's Mormon sexuality, and there's Muslim sexuality. These are not related to human sexuality. That's one of the themes that I try to write about in the book. We have been infected with ideas around sexuality that have nothing to do with who we are, biologically. What the Pope thinks about sex has nothing to do with what real sex is all about. He wouldn't know. He's never had it. So, we need to define what sex and sexuality is for ourselves as atheists. We shouldn't be letting other people, whether it's the way we were religiously trained as children, or where culture it is, or the TV, or soap operas, or whatever else tells us. So I'm going to give you I'm going to challenge you here. You know Jeff Foxworthy and You Know I Can Be a Redneck? You remember that one, You Know I Can Be a Redneck gift? What I've noticed about us secularists is we're still infected with religious ideas about sex. And we don't even know it. I have had so many atheists come up to me after reading Sex and God, or even after reading God Virus, say, I had no idea how I was still being programmed by the way my Catholic background, or my Baptist background, or my Muslim background were still controlling some of the way I think about myself and my sexuality. So here's the challenge. You might be a Christian atheist if you feel guilty about masturbating. I dare say if I asked people to raise their hand, I would get people raising their hand on some of the questions. I'm not going to ask you to do that. But I'll bet some of us still feel guilty about masturbating. You might be a Christian atheist if you feel shame admitting you enjoy pornography. In our own research, we found that 94% of all males like, not just our research, but others, like pornography, and 72% of females like pornography. Now, they like different kinds of pornography. I'm not saying we like the same kind, but women like a lot of pornography just like men like a lot of pornography. And there are some differences, and I think some of those differences may be more cultural than even biological. You might be a Christian atheist if you have difficulty talking to your children about sex and sexuality. If you're embarrassed to talk to your children about sex, that's your problem. It's probably the way you were trained, it's probably the way you experienced your own parents. You might be a Christian atheist if you have difficulty talking to your spouse or partner about sexual fantasies that you would like to try. If you cannot communicate those things that you would like to do with your partner, that is a problem that you need to address, in your relationship. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We all have sexual fantasies. We all have fantasies we'd like to act on. Now, it doesn't mean your partner has to participate in the fantasies. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you can't even tell them what the fantasies are, there's a problem, because you've been programmed to think, well, this particular fantasy is perverted or wrong, or she'll think or he'll think I'm crazy if I express this kind of fantasy. Well, all you have to do is get online. You can find out there's a hell of a lot of fetishes I've never even heard about sometimes. And there's thousands of people doing them, and nobody's not killing anybody, not hurting anybody. In fact, some of them are a hell of a lot safer than some of the other kinds of Christian sex that we see happening, like abstinence-only sex. That causes pregnancies, and that causes sexually transmitted diseases. And if you don't believe me, just look at the research. States with high levels of abstinence-only training have higher sexually transmitted infections and higher levels of teen pregnancies. You might be a Christian atheist if you feel disgust around normal sexual activities. So, why I wrote Sex and God, I did it to help you, people like you, come to terms with your sexuality independent of the religious training that you've got and the culture that you live in right now. I wanted to build a framework for us to think about human sexuality independent of religiosity. And quite frankly, I would guess not one of you in this room, or if it is, it's a very small number in this room, was actually raised with healthy sexual ideas and attitudes. If you were raised by religious parents, that alone closes the deal as far as I'm concerned. Religious parents simply cannot tell you true, good, sexual, healthy attitudes. And I think we need to examine that. We need to look inside ourselves and say, maybe I still harbor sexual things. I had a fellow come to me, this guy, I've known him for 6 years. He's an atheist since he was 14. He read Sex God, and he came up to me, well actually he read it and he heard 2 of my talks. And he came up to me and said, I need to have an hour of your time. And we made an appointment, met in a coffee shop like I did this afternoon with folks. And he sat down and said, I was scared shitless after your second talk because I didn't realize how much I'm still programmed, how much guilt I still have about me as a sexual being. I don't know too many people that are more atheist than this particular fellow is. And yet he still discovered stuff just from a couple of my talks in the book. I want us to celebrate positive sexual values and sexual attitudes. And I think atheists, I think secularists, agnostic, humanists, I think we have an opportunity to recreate human sexuality that's healthier and more satisfying and a lot less destructive. Because sex the way it's done among the Catholics and the Baptists, the Mormons, the Muslims, is very destructive. And that's I try to document that in the book. I want to encourage us to be open about our sexuality as well. I think we're unique. We are not constrained by these crazy religious ideas. So let's take advantage of that uniqueness. I call myself a secular sexual. Think about that. I'm not a Catholic sexual. I'm not a Baptist. I'm not a Muslim. I am a secular sexual. And when you think about that, it opens up a whole world of examination. What are some of my assumptions about my sexuality, about my partner's sexuality, or my kid's sexuality, or my parents' sexuality? There's lots of people that we make assumptions about, and it's based on that training we got very early on. So we're not tied to this kind of sexuality that religions have. So why in the hell are we acting like them? Why do we act like Christians? I'm not a Christian. I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form. I'm in control of my own sexuality. So I'm a sex-positive atheist, and I'm very proud of it. I call myself a secular sexual. That's what I want to leave you with today. Sex is good. So is drinking. So I want you to leave here thinking this. Let's do them both responsibly. That's the method, that's the moral, if you will, of humanism, of atheist sexuality is, I want to be responsible drinking, I want to be responsible sexually. If you just carry that around, being responsible as a sexual human being, that will lead to all sorts of other beautiful things that can happen to you. Whether you want to be a monogamous person or not, I don't care. I would dare say, almost not one person in this room is truly monogamous. It's also possible that you do not know a person that's truly monogamous. Now, let me explain that to you. What was Jesus' definition of monogamy?
One man, one woman.
One sex partner for life, period. That's monogamy. There is a species that's monogamous. It's called the anglerfish. In that particular species, the male embeds himself in the female's skin and stays there for life. That's monogamy, right? Now, most of us in here are going to have multiple sexual partners in our lifetime. That automatically means you are not a monogamous person. We are not a monogamous species. You may or may not have multiple partners while you're involved with one partner or not. That's your choice. I don't care. All I ask is be responsible about it. And don't judge other people for their choices. Because, that's what's going on in the religious community. You got ministers up there who are alpha males in mega churches, and they're fucking all sorts of other people in the church. And they occasionally get caught. Now, every time you see a Ted Haggard get caught, I think, how many other gay guys was he screwing before he got caught with that one? He didn't get caught the first time. He'd been doing it 50 times, 100 times. When I was growing up, there was a church my parents founded, and the minister got caught screwing one of the people he shouldn't have been screwing. He was married, had a couple kids. And my father was on the board. He confronted him. He said we should fire him, and the board voted not to fire him. We're going to forgive him, give him another chance. He got 3 chances. He got caught screwing people he shouldn't have been screwing 3 times over a 10-year time period before they finally fired the sucker. And then he went to Oklahoma and started another church. with his brother who had been fired for the same reason from another church. And this is just in my little denomination, independent Christian. It's like a step above being a Baptist, but not too much. You still get dunked in that church, the one I was in. Isn't that interesting? So this is a very non-monogamous minister, and he's standing up there saying, you have to stay faithful to your spouse for the rest of your life. Well, bullshit. I don't want to be, I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be the kind of sexual person that I am. And I'm not going to dictate what your sexuality is. I don't want you dictating mine. And that's what we see right now going on, for example, in this election. Republicans are saying guys can't marry guys and gals can't marry gals. And the kind of sex you have shouldn't, you shouldn't be allowed to have abortions. You shouldn't have birth control. I mean, all that stuff that Rich Santorum tried to cram down our throats will get crammed down if we're not careful in this next. I'm not making a political announcement. Okay, well, I just hope that you will take a look at Sex and God, and of course the God virus too, if you haven't read that. And with that, let's just call it quits, and I'll take any questions you've got. Yeah. Well, I was doing psychology for 29 years. I loved that. I'd probably go back to clinical psychology or counseling side. I enjoyed that a lot. And I enjoy coaching. I coached executives quite a bit over the last 29 years, 30 years. So, but I'm kind of retired. I'm into the having more fun and writing books stage. So I enjoy that a lot. A lot more fun than traveling around working with executives. Yeah, nobody had ever written a book like this before, and I didn't realize that. When I started researching for this book, the inspiration for this book came out of the God virus. Chapter 5 in the God virus was Sex and God, or Sex in the God virus, rather. And the response to that one chapter was just overwhelming. People really liked that chapter and said it opened their eyes to stuff around their own sexuality. And I thought, I need to look into that some more, and I've always been interested in sex since I was a kid. I would consider myself somewhat an expert on sex from a personal perspective and a professional perspective. I mean, when you sit in the clinician's office and you listen to other people's sexual problems, plus I studied with Albert Ellis, who's one of the great sexologists of the whole 20th century. So from very early on in my career, I was learning about this stuff. So that really gave me the basis to write this. And I looked in the literature and I could find nobody who had written anything about this. There's literally not one book ever been written on this subject. I couldn't even find articles written. Now, the Christians write articles all the time about sex and God, but it's Christian sex, it's Catholic sex, it's Buddhist sex, it's Hindu sex. It's not sex from a scientific perspective and how that how religion impacts our true human sexuality. And it's like anything. The more you study about it, the more you learn. Anybody who writes a book learns 10 times more than you can ever put in a book. And that was the fun thing, learning all this stuff about religion's impact on sexuality. I'm still finding stuff long after I finish writing the book. It's an enormous topic, but nobody's ever written about it. But that tells you something, doesn't it? That religion has the power to blind us to the most obvious thing. That religion impacts us as human sexual beings, and we don't even know it, or we deny it. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to inspire people to take a real hard look at themselves and ask the question, how is religion messed with my sexuality? And what can I do about it? That answers your Destin, I get that question from everybody. Actually, I don't know if there'll be follow-up or not. I was driving down here to this event today, and an idea came to me I hadn't thought about before, and that is somebody emailed me and wanted to argue with me about, and he's actually an agnostic, and he wanted to argue with me about the good or bad of some religion and Christianity. And he was showing he says, I love studying comparative religion, it's really interesting and all. And I got to thinking after I got that email from him, yeah, if you study comparative religions from an academic perspective, yeah, it's interesting. What I'm exploring, I'm thinking about exploring now is, I want to explore comparative religions from the ground level. How does Buddhism impact you as human beings, psychologically, emotionally, sexually? How does Hinduism? How does Christianity? How does Catholicism? Nobody's looking at that. Comparative religions. Let's compare religions on how they screw people up. Almost used another one there, whatever. Because that's where religion, we really ought to be looking. This academic comparative religions is really bullshit. What we should be asking is, how does religion impact us as human beings? And let's compare that. You know, how does Catholicism impact women? How does being a Pentecostal impact children? There's real issues, and nobody's writing about that either. So I'm not sure. That may be something I'll be exploring in the next, who knows. I'm too busy promoting this book and talking about, and frankly, I'm having too much fun talking about sex. I mean, can you think of anything more fun than talking about sex? That's a good question, Dustin. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think what it did was it's helped me fill in some blanks. Maybe it's helped me kind of understand the full picture. But you know, I'm old enough. I've seen it all several times. So there's not a whole lot new I haven't seen or talked to and listened to. But writing it, creating a coherent picture in a book, it's a lot different than just experiencing it and thinking about it and talking to people. I don't think it changed me, but it gave me, okay, now I can really talk from a framework, a perspective that I never had a framework to work from before. And I really tried in Sex and God, I tried to create a framework. I use the metaphor of a map. I use a map metaphor in the book to help people understand that your sexuality, you have 3 maps inside yourself. 3 different maps, and they conflict with each other. And it's that metaphor, when I came up with the metaphor, that really helped me put the book together, let's put it that way. And yeah, I think the map metaphor even helped me understand me a little bit as well. So maybe that's the answer to your question. Christopher Hitchens is right up there at the top for me. I love the guy. I love writing, how he wrote. I wish I could write half as good as he did. Even 1/10 as good as he did. He's an amazing author. Richard Dawkins, since I've been reading him for 20 plus years, so he's definitely a big, I would call him a hero. You know, a hero is somebody who stepped out and taken a risk at great potential cost to them. And I went to, for example, the American Atheist Convention this year. Richard Dawkins is there. And he has a bodyguard around him. Well, that's a risk. Some people would actually put a bullet in him, I think they could. So that's a hero to me. It's as much as somebody fighting in Iraq. He's taking an enormous risk with his own life in many ways. And I admire people like that. I admire Chris Hitchens for his stance when he was dying. You know, don't let anybody tell you at a deathbed conversion to faith. If I did it, that wasn't me doing it. It was the drugs or something like that. So, you know, even in death, Christopher Hitchens, again, that's heroic kinds of work.
Is there anybody else?
Oh, definitely. Albert Ellis was one of my early heroes, a great psychotherapist. And Bertrand Russell. When I read Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian, back in the mid-70s, I was in seminary when I read Why I'm Not a Christian. Bad time to read a book like that. And yeah, he's a huge, I could probably name several others. Templeton wrote, I don't want to go there. There's probably several others. I think Albert Ellis is probably one of all of them that influenced me the most because he hit me the earliest in my career. And I was a rational emotive therapist for many years. I really understand a rational approach to psychotherapy, and I use it myself. I started the Secular Therapist Project. I don't know if you know about that. It's hard to find a good secular therapist. There's so many of these damn Christian counselors out there. Well, that's an oxymoron. You can't be a Christian counselor. That means you have lopped off an entire area of examination. You know, examining your delusions. I started this almost a year ago with Han Hills out of North Carolina. He's put a wonderful Facebook page together, web page together, and we have this entire database of. Our goal is to get 200 therapists, atheist, secular, agnostic, secular, humanist therapists on our database so that if you want some therapy, you can find somebody you know is not going to send you back to church or ask you to read the Bible or say you need to get your chakras realigned. I mean, that's the kind of thing we're looking for, and it's not as easy as you think. I've had people say you can walk down the street of Atlanta and find 3 Christian counselors, and you can't find one secular counselor in the whole of Atlanta. Well, the reason for that is, if you say I'm an atheist psychologist, half your clients will leave because they're religious. And your source of clients, ministers and churches, will stop sending them. So it's almost professional suicide to say I'm an atheist as a psychologist or a social worker. So our website, we're trying to get the word out about it. Our website shows, keeps it confidential. It's kind of like a dating site, like eHarmony or Match.com. The therapist stays anonymous and the client stays anonymous, and they correspond with each other through our system anonymously until they decide to step out and make an appointment. That way everybody's kind of protected a little bit. We're not trying to out anybody, we're just trying to help people find the therapy they need, and they don't need to be told to go back to church or to pray more or get their chakras worked out or any kind of new age bullshit. And there are new age therapists out there doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And they got PhDs in it. Wow. Very irritating. So